Hi everyone, I'm KJ. Back in 2021, I was diagnosed with 2 autoimmune kidney diseases that caused me to have these crazy weight fluctuations, caused me to feel very sick, and put me on immune suppressants for over a year. Today I'm going to be going over health-related questions that were asked of me on TikTok and Instagram, and the last question that I go over really talks about how I was able to ultimately recover. This is life support. Amali Apina asks, I have FSGS and I'm a software engineer. Can you discuss how you balance it all? I'm newly diagnosed this year. So for those of you who don't know, FSGS, as long as with the 2 autoimmune diseases that I had, IgA nephropathy and minimal change disease, all affect the filtering of the kidney. So our kidneys aren't able to filter, so we leak into ourselves, causing us to gain a ridiculous amount of water weight in the process. And the only way to stop them is to shut down your immune system in general. So some people do chemo, and some people take heavy doses of a steroid. In my case, I took 80 milligrams a day of prednisone. And to those who are new to this channel, I've always been balancing a lot. I started this YouTube channel back when I attended MIT. I have led multiple startups. I had my own side businesses, and building my personal brand, it all becomes a lot. I think the advice that I would give to someone in software engineering specifically is to know your limits. Know that there's days where you're gonna be putting in a lot of work. You're going to be stopping fires that are happening, and you need to work long hours. But know that you can't sustain that for long periods of time. So in the moments where it feels chiller and there isn't as much on your plate, don't feel bad. Take those moments to actually recuperate, and you'll be able to contribute more in the future as a result. Yash Kumar 6073 asks, how do you manage stress and studies and managing content creation? So my autoimmune diseases came on when I was under a tremendous amount of stress. At that point, I was in the middle of moving cross country. I was deciding about my future at Stanford. I was really high up in 2 different startups in engineering positions, and I had just gotten to 100,000 subscribers on this channel. So there was so much going on and so much stress in my life. So a lot of what I focus on now is just keeping that stress down. Just because my autoimmune disease is in remission doesn't mean that it'll never come back. It's always in me. They're chronic. There's no cure. I just have to make sure that I put my body in the best position possible so that it doesn't happen. So for me, that's really focusing on my fitness, my time with my loved ones, and just being able to relax when I want to relax. ZOH007 asks, how are you motivated all the time? The short answer is I'm not motivated all the time. But when there are moments where I do feel momentum and I feel creative juices flowing, I make sure to take advantage of those, if that makes sense. So, I might not do anything creative for a couple days, or a couple days at work might feel slow. But when I do have something to really push the pedal on, I do it. And I can do, say, a whole week's of work just in one day as a software engineer, or I can write 4 different videos in the future for this channel that if I tried to really spread out before, I wouldn't be able to be that productive. But I just take these little bursts of motivation to continue to push forward. And I will say that the biggest reason why I'm able to sustain this is because ultimately I know I'm disciplined. I have bigger goals that are further out into the future that I know that the things that I'm doing today will help towards. So it gives me all the motivation, all the discipline needed to continue to push on the day-to-day basis. Yamna 1997 asks, how do you cope with mental health issues without medication? For example, fear, stress, and anxiety. So yeah, I don't take any medication. If you were curious, the only things that I really take are my supplements. I take magnesium supplements, iron, and vitamin D. Beyond that, not really anything else. But I'll really say that the biggest thing in my life is focusing on fitness and focusing on taking time for myself to just turn my brain off and not think. So if that involves just playing FIFA with the boys or watching a trashy reality TV show, that's something that I'm willing to do because I know it's going to help me in the long run. And then on the fitness side of things, I love playing basketball, which does a good job of sweating out all the toxins that are in my body, all the stresses. And from time to time, I'll also weightlift, which just helps me feel better in general and more confident and more comfortable in my own body, which I think reduces general stress. Zaynox asks, how to reduce weight and body fat at the same time, and I don't have the time to work out. What you're asking is how to do a body recomposition, and Honestly, it's pretty hard. Most people do a bulk first and then cut their body down and not try to do it at the same time. If you don't have too much time on your hands, you need to just carve out some time, do some calisthenics, do some weight training, because ultimately to do a body recomposition, you have to gain enough muscle to counteract the weight loss that you're having. You need to build muscle and then lose fat at the exact same time. And the only real way to do that is to build and grow your muscles, as well as stay in a caloric deficit. But the caloric deficit cannot be too far down either, because your muscles won't have the right nutrients to be able to grow. But because of the complicated answer that I just gave, you can see how it's very difficult to both lose fat and gain muscle, even if you do have the time. And from your question, it sounds like you don't really have too much time, so maybe just take things one step at a time. Vishal Maila asks, I have a few stretch marks around my waist. It happened during the pandemic. Any tips to get back to my original skin? So I do have bad news that I had to come to terms with also, which is stretch marks are permanent, unfortunately, but there are ways to make them look less visible. I started off using a couple of creams. That didn't really help. Really, the only things that helped were me losing a significant amount of weight and just time passing. And they slowly faded to how they look like today, which is a lot less drastic as they looked like before. In the future, I'm actually considering using laser procedures to reduce the visibility of my stretch marks, but I'm not fully decided on if that's something that I want to do. It's just that I'm so young and there's a lot of upside to getting rid of them now. But then on the other hand, there are battle scars that prove how resilient I was. So I don't know which way I'm going to go. An anonymous person asks, is the push-pull leg workout good to lose fat while gaining muscle? So we just went over body recompositioning and how that's really hard. I think the push-pull leg program is something that I would really recommend, and it's something that I've been able to sustain for years on end, because I think it has a good amount of rest between different muscle groups. That's why you separated push-pull legs and then have a break and then push-pull legs. So your push days are 4 days apart and your pull days are 4 days apart and so on. I think any workout program that works out all your muscle groups within a specific week and gives you ample time to rest each muscle group is a good one. I think the biggest thing in any sort of weight loss journey or fat loss journey is just being consistent. So find a program that you're most interested in and just do that. Just make sure that you're hitting all the different muscle groups, and that will maximize the efficiency that you'll lose weight. Lalit M15 asks, best diet tips to bulk and then cut? Any meal prep tips? Yeah, so I think my biggest piece of advice is to just count calories very diligently right at the beginning. I think a lot of people don't know how much they're putting into their bodies, and once you start really tracking your calories on a day-to-day basis, you start to understand how much calories is in everything that you eat, and it becomes a lot easier to actually be in a caloric deficit and lose the weight moving forward, because you just have that better idea. In terms of the macros that I try to hit around 0.8 grams per every pound of body weight that I weigh at that specific moment. And hitting the protein goals is not only important for the muscle growth, but it's also important for making sure that your body stays full and you feel satiated and ready to take on any specific day. Mahmoud Gamal says, struggling with emotional eating, lost weight finally after 10 years and now regaining the weight. To you, I'd really only recommend to just get started. I think the more weight that you put on, the further away your weight loss goal feels, so then you don't want to get started and this negative spiral just continues. So what I recommend to people that I'm talking to is just start with 3 days a week. Start this week and start for the next 3 weeks, and beyond that you should have a healthy habit to move forward with. But you really have to put in the mental energy to just start with those first 3 weeks and the first 3 days within those 3 weeks. Maria Juarez asks, may I ask what treatment you were on? We are going through the same issue. So yeah, I did write down everything that was putting into my body, so I guess I can read that out for you. I was put on 80 milligrams of prednisone a day. The prednisone was the immune suppressant, basically shutting down my immune system so that my body would stop killing itself. Was put on 120 milligrams of furosemide. This is a diuretic, so it causes me to urinate a ton throughout the day and get rid of a lot of that excess water that was being put into my body by myself over the first couple of months. I also had to take various other medications like vitamin D, losartan, which is for managing my blood pressure, atorvastatin for cholesterol because the kidney going down puts a lot of strain on the liver, and antibiotics because my immune system was so severely low and they just wanted to kind of fight anything that happened before it happened. So yeah, it was a lot of medication, and a lot of what my body physically had to go through was just dealing with life with that much medication on a daily basis, and then ultimately life without that much medication medication after I got used to life with medication. So that's why personally I was feeling very sick while that process was happening. And something like prednisone, I have to start off with 80 milligrams a day. But even when I am like in remission and cured, you can't just stop prednisone cold turkey. Otherwise, really bad things will happen because your body gets reliant on the medication itself. So I had to go from 80 milligrams a day to 70 to 60. And then when it got to low stages, had to cut it off slower than that. Yeah, that's the process. A user with a bunch of numbers asks, hello, how did you improve your condition? And really, I just took things one day at a time. At some point, I began to realize that this was something that I couldn't solve in a short period of time, that it was going to be something that took years to be able to fully recover from. And once I made that realization, it was a lot less pressure on myself, and I was no longer feeling stressed about the stress of continuing to go through this battle for a long period of time. And every day I just allowed my body to do what it needed to do. So if all I can do in a specific day was get on the cycling machine, that's what I did. If I felt strong enough to lift weights, that's what I did. And some days I felt okay enough to play basketball, and that's what I did. But really it was just listening to my body and taking things one day at a time, knowing that the caloric deficit that I was in, that the exercises that I was doing was ultimately going to help me in the long run. Another user with a bunch of numbers asks, my 20-year-old son is going through the same thing right now. So how are you doing now? Hopefully, as you can see, by my spirits, by my physical appearance, and by the consistency that I'm posting videos, that I think I'm in a great place right now. I'd honestly say that I'm thriving and I'm doing very well. I'm taking part in a men's basketball league now. I'm going to the gym consistently, going on longer walks, hanging out with friends, starting my businesses, filming videos constantly. There's really nothing more that I can ask of. I'm just grateful to be as healthy as I could be in this moment, and I'm just living every day like it's my last. That's all the health related questions that I had today. If you want to be a part of a future video and you want me to answer your question, make sure to follow me on Instagram and look out for stories where I post a question asking for people to ask me questions. If you want to work with me or any of my other MIT affiliated mentors one-on-one, I have a year-long mentorship program that is just starting up. So make sure to check out aspirementors.tech and apply if you want to unlock your potential. As always, stay inspired, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next one.